Welcome to the Teachers on Fire podcast, where I profile agents of growth and transformation in education today. Each guest shares their highs, their lows, their passions, their goals, and the resources that are shaping their thinking and inspiring their practice. For show notes and links from each episode, visit teachersonfire.net. You can also follow the show at Teachers on Fire on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And of course, please subscribe to the show wherever you listen to podcasts. I'm your host, Tim Cavey. Let's meet today's guest. Today, I'm speaking with Jesus HUERTA. Jesus is an elementary school teacher, instructor for the Krause Center for Innovation, a 3D print enthusiast, a futurist, and a believer that technology is for everyone. Follow Jesus on Twitter at JesusH1979, or I guess we could say 1979, on Instagram at Mr. Huerta's Class, and on his blog at mrhuertasclass.weebly.com. Jesus, thank you so much for coming on the show today. Are you ready to talk about education?
Yeah, Tim, really good job with my last name. I always have to tell my students that it's like, where are you going? And then ta. So really good job there. Yeah, that was thanks for all the introduction right there.
Awesome. Well, yeah, we're off to a good start. You and I have been in touch for some time, and I've been a fan from a distance. I heard you quite a while ago on someone else's podcast, and now I have the privilege of chatting with you in real time here on Teachers on Fire. So I'm pumped for that. Why don't you start us off by telling us a little bit more about your current context in education, Jesus? What does that look like?
So I live in Centro, California. This is way down south, about an hour and a half east of San Diego. And the school I teach at is called Kennedy Gardens. It's in a town about 20 minutes away from where I'm at, even further south. It's in a town called Calexico. The county we live in, Imperial County, it's a high poverty area, high English language learner area. The city I teach in and the school in particular, I mean, it's very high EL. I want to say it's like 80% EL. The school I'm at, up there.
Hmm.
Um, it's a border town, like a true border town. I mean, we live in a border community, but Calexico's right across from Mexicali. I could walk, 8 blocks and I'm in Mexico now. Jump in my car, drive like 3 minutes, and then hop out, and I'm in Mexico now.
Wow.
From my front door, though, I mean, I got to jump on on the freeway. Like 20-minute drive, and then yeah. But that's a real border town. So I mean, I do have some students that they cross over every weekend. Some that go back and forth sometimes during the week. So that's a plus because they have extended family available to them, but it's also a hurdle because they're coming back and forth, and that can be like a burden for them also. And currently, I am teaching fifth grade at my school site.
All right. Fifth grade. Do you call that middle school in your context?
No, we used to here in El Centro have middle school 6th, 7th, and 8th, but right now we have it K through 6 is elementary, and then they jump over to the middle school.
All right, fair enough. Okay, well, we're in a similar range, at least. I teach 8th grade here in my context, but I must say that's a remarkable community, Jesus. When some of your students are crossing the border each week, I'm just thinking about all of the logistical hurdles you must face in terms of just keeping parents and the broader, the relatives, grandparents, the broader community engaged, and communication must be so challenging. So just a really unique setting. Absolutely. Well, it is story time. That's where I like to start, Jesus. So if you don't mind, share with us about a low moment or an experience of adversity that you've faced somewhere in your teaching or education journey, and describe how you overcame it.
So this was actually we're coming on a year when this happened. So a year ago, I was a finalist for the Leroy Finkel Fellowship. That's an award that Q has, and basically it's like Shark Tank for teachers. They get 4 ideas. The teachers go up. It can be solo, or you can have teams. Usually they have pairs when people team up, and you pitch your idea on a budget of $1,000. And then if you had an extra 1,000, how would you extend it? Um, so I was a finalist, and so Tim, if you go on my Twitter, Instagram, I don't post as much. I'm more on Twitter, posting everything we're doing in my class. It's not even close to a traditional classroom. So it wasn't a good fit where I was at. And I was let go Monday, and Friday I had to compete. So I didn't have a job for a few months. I mean, I had a job, prospectively where I'm at now, and I knew I had strong connections with them because I had worked with Calexico for 2 summers on their after school enrichment program, especially during the summer, helping them design curriculum and training staff on not just 3D printing, but other things that would engage the students. And it's something meatier than just, hey, come in during the summer and then you draw all day. Not that there's anything wrong with drawing, but something more than just one thing the whole summer. So yeah, I had to get ready to go out there and pitch these ideas. Um, but then it was, you know, in the back of my mind, I don't have a job. I don't have a job. I got up on stage, I'm speaking, and like a second before, I'm like, I better do a good job because you don't have a job anyway. So I was like, okay, I better just go out there and just, let it all out. Um, but yeah, everything worked out perfectly where I'm at now. It's they want everything that I'm doing. They have this initiative where there's 12 classrooms. All of them but mine are sixth grade. I was sixth grade, but last minute they switched me over to fifth grade, and I still kept MacBooks. And they really want us to change what it is that kids are learning and how they're learning. So it was a huge hurdle, and there was a lot of I want to say adversity. There's a lot of there's a lot of problems over the summer. We were struggling not with money, but like, okay, what can we spend on? What can we not? I was sure I was going to land somewhere, but then when you don't have that sure thing, you're always worrying about it. So that was something that was pretty rough. But luckily, I did get a job, and they're happy here with what I'm doing, which I'm glad I believe in what I was doing. But also, I was able to come out on top during the Leroy Finkel Fellowship. So
Well, congratulations. Do you mean to say that you won it this year?
I won it last year, and
Last year.
actually this year I'm coordinating and hosting it for Q.
Okay. And so I want to make sure I get this right. So I've seen tweets from you and from some others about Leroy's big idea. We're talking about the same
Yeah,
thing here?
yeah, that's it.
Okay. Very, very cool. So tell us a little bit more about that. What was the idea that allowed you to win last year?
So, and I'll send you the video afterwards, Tim, because one of my buddies recorded. I didn't know he was going to record it, so I have it. But basically, for $1,000, you can get some 3D printers, a box of 8 rolls of filament, um, and 10 sets of hardware. And the kids would learn how to run the printers and also 3D print prosthetics. Now, each group would be 2 to 3 students. They would have a different, student. Like, oh, the student has a child that's 8 years old and they need it this size. This group has a man, he's 27. Here's a lady. So they would have different sizes they would do. So they would think, oh, well, I'm building it, hypothetically. This is just an imaginary person.
Sure.
But in reality, they're making these different sizes because eventually those hands will be donated over to Enable. Enable's a group that works with people and educators to create 3D printed prosthetics. So these kids would print prosthetics, assemble it, share how it works, demonstrate that it works, test it, everything. And then, I would take, and that's the project up till then. Then through Enable, I would donate the hand, and if possible, and if done early enough in the year, which that's where it makes it a little tricky, um, if Enable can get us in contact with those people, so then the students could have a Skype call and meet the person that they didn't know they were actually helping. Because once the project is done on a Friday, I would just pack up everything and say, "Oh, well, it's because I sent it over to this other school that wants to see what cool stuff we're doing in class." But in reality, I'm shipping it out to these people in need over to Enable. And then the follow through would be they get to meet, this person, this child that didn't have a hand, couldn't afford a prosthetic. And now these kids help this other kid, and they're 10 years old helping someone in a gigantic way because prosthetics start off $5,000 to $10,000 and they only go up in price. But with a 3D printer, um, technically with $500, you could print out a prosthetic on your own. You could get a printer, filament, and the gear needed to do that. So then the kids will reflect however they want to, Flipgrid, a presentation, a quick write, just, how do they feel after helping this person? And then the follow through with the extra 1,000 is you would buy 4 to 5 what are called Ender 3 printers. they're do it yourself. So the kids would learn electronics, electrical engineering. They would build the printer themselves from the ground up because all the parts are disassembled. So it's a complete 100% do it yourself kit. And then they would just have more printers available and continue learning. But when there's problems, they're the ones that have to take it apart and troubleshoot it because they actually built it. And so that was my idea.
What a phenomenal project. It sounds familiar. I feel like I've come across it before, but thank you so much for that review. And it's just stunning in terms of how much meaning and significance that has. So many, I think back to a previous guest of Teachers on Fire, Dan Ryder, who talked about trying to get away from dumpster projects, right? Work that we get students to do, creative work, project work that just ends up in a dumpster and really has no meaning. And I'll admit it's hard to get away from that completely sometimes. But in your case, not only does it have a purpose, but what a purpose it has. It's actually literally changing lives.
And if you don't mind, the prosthetics, I'm almost sure the person you've seen is Valerie Perez. She's been working on having kids, and I think she was teaching third or fourth grade. Right now, if I remember right, she's the either tech coach or tech teacher for her site. But when I got my first printer, I only had one available, and I was like, "Well, how do I do prosthetics with one?" And I was like, "Okay, well, I'll put it on the back burner." And then I saw her, and she was using less expensive printers and just having kids build them and assemble them and study them in third grade. I was like, "Wow, that's amazing." So definitely want to shout out her, Valerie Perez. I don't remember her Twitter, but if you search her up, you'll find her, and she's always doing amazing things beyond just 3D printing. But yeah, she's definitely one that I can think of off the top of my head that does prosthetics in the classroom for kids to learn not just how does it work, what's the cost, why do it this way, but also the empathy that comes from it.
Well, let's keep going on this 3D printing theme, Jesus. You call yourself a 3D printing enthusiast. I've listened to you describe some of your projects in the past. And when I think of 3D printing, I think of the sort of craze that hit education in this space about 10 years ago. I don't know if you would agree, but just from my perspective and in my context, I remember years when, man, every school was on fire to do 3D printing. And I think it continues, but maybe it's a little more subdued, or maybe some of the craze factor, you know what I mean, has come off a little bit. So I guess my question to you is this: what excites you about 3D printing in schools today? You've already shared some of that. And in your view, how have opportunities for learning and creating evolved over the last 10 years? What can students do today that they couldn't in the past?
I think it did blow up because I was doing this. This is my 6th year teaching, and my 6th year printing. Um, I I think the biggest thing is even back then. So if someone started 10 years ago, I can't imagine how much they paid for a printer. Um, the first one I had, and I had just one for like 2 or 3 years, and I carried it around with me wherever I went to teach and for conferences. Um, that one 6 years ago, 6 years ago was $2,500. Um, that it's so expensive. It was expensive. I think the other reason people right now might have been like, yeah, I tried it. It's not for me. And this is 5 or 6 years ago. If they're hearing this, they should come back because I have a machine. I printed and you can see it on Twitter. I printed a marshmallow helmet for Halloween.
Okay.
And I have a big head, so just so you know, the print volume, the print volume is huge, and it's less than $400 the printer.
Wow.
Um, the filament is 20, but I mean I buy it in bulk, so I average it for $12 that one roll. And I mean I don't like to talk numbers too much, but I know sometimes teachers are like, well, look, I got to buy this out of my pocket just to get interest. Maybe then I can get more. Um, there you could start off for a whole year, enough filament and one printer for right under $500. Not that you should spend 500 in your classroom, but I mean if you're like, you know what, I got money and I want to do something, it's definitely a place to go. With that one roll, I could probably print 2 or 3 of those helmets. But if I print keychains that say "Teachers on Fire," Tim, just dropping a hint, maybe I'll send you some too.
Hello.
Um, uh, I could, and it's. I'm gonna go low on the guesstimate. I could probably print 600 of them, keychains that say "Teacher on Fire." Like a little disc, version of it. Because depending on how much, how solid it is, you don't waste as much plastic.
Right.
So that's one thing that really excites me about it. That it's the entry is not as high. There's a bigger community now, so there is a large learning curve. It took me like 5 months to get something done properly, and there was nobody around here to ask. And I mean, I would kind of go on Twitter, but I was like, I don't want to ask questions and look dumb, so that's my own fault. But there's a huge network now, so it's easier to get started. And there's a lot of different software that make it a lot easier too. The reason that I love it though, and I push it on students, is just the things that are coming. There's bioprinting, which 3 years ago I had. Um, it's at Wake Forest, Dr. Altala. Hopefully I said his name properly. He's one of the pioneers in bioprinting. So they could, Tim, if you had an accident, your ear got chopped off, they would take a little bit of your blood and DNA, about the size of a thumbnail. So that way they have the code for you, print an ear, and then when they attach it, it's the same thing. It looks, your skin tone, it's everything, but the code is there, so your body won't reject it. It'll just say, "Hey, I need to heal right here where there's a suture and the stitches."
Wow.
Same thing if you had, heart disease and you didn't know it was in your family, and you know what, you're getting very sick, and they're like, "Look, there's a problem with your heart." Instead of waiting on a list, they'll say, "Well, let's get some of your DNA. We'll 3D print a heart. Okay, this valve, this is where the problem is. Let's correct it in the model, print it out, then switch it out." After that, the worst part of recovering is, your chest has, been opened up, but not worrying like, "Oh, is my body going to reject this body part?" The other thing is 3D printed homes. They're doing it right now in Mexico, for less than 15,000, less than a decent, decently used car. You can get a home printed in 24 hours, and it doesn't have installation because the way it prints, it uses the same honeycomb pattern that you use on regular plastic printing. So it creates like a natural insulation, so it stays cool and stays warm when it needs to. But the last one right now that I saw maybe like a week ago, that's the one that I'm like, whoa. So there, and it's in its infancy, like the size of your index finger, but like a tube like that with a resin. They put it in with these cameras around it, and it flashes an image. So there's this little tugboat that you use it when you start 3D printing. You can use it to check the parameters of your printer. Is it off? Is it crooked? Is it melting the plastic too hot? The little boat that would take me 15 minutes, the size they did it in 10 seconds.
Oh,
I saw it and I was just thinking of everything that's going to be changed in 4 years, 5 years, probably less. I say 5 years because we always say 5 years, but um, they just like perfected it. So now what's going to happen? They're going to expand it bigger, bigger. Other people are going to say, okay, how did they figure out? Okay, we're going to do our take on it. So once it hits the classroom, that's where I'm like, okay, when I print, I give the kids like an hour or two when it's something that they want to just pick out. Like, oh, I found this model I want. I want this keychain. I want a spinner. I want this. And then when they design, I kind of try to figure out, okay, you know what? I have these many printers. How big should I make it for everybody? And what time limit am I looking at? But instead of putting a limit of 3 hours, it's like, okay, well, what do you need for your project? Oh, I need this. Okay, well, let's put it in the bigger, tube of resin, the bigger printer, and let's get it ready. Oh, wait, I'm done talking to you. It's ready. Let's get it out. Like that's how fast it would go. So
wow.
yeah, that's why I love 3D printing.
Well, amazing stuff, Jesus. Thank you for sharing all of those opportunities that our learners have today in the 3D printing space. And it's super exciting to hear how that space is evolving, continues to evolve over the 6 years that you've been printing. As you look across your PLN and your own practice, what else is setting you on fire about education today?
So something that I know you like to do, Tim, is entrepreneurship. And right now we have a project in the classroom where they will design a board game. So before I went into education, I studied game design, game theory, and coding, but I wasn't able to finish that. So I kind of bounced around and started later in life, in education. So that came over with me though, and it's something I had to learn also at different conferences. They had that idea of, look, whatever you're passionate about, bring it into the classroom. And video games and just games in general are something that I've always loved. So I brought that over. So what the kids do is they will get in teams of three, 2 to 3, not solo, but not more than three. That's usually the magic number right there. And they'll come up with a story for their board game, kind of like the backstory to it. And I want them to think of it as a high end game like Settlers of Catan, Epidemic, those kinds of games. So they'll write the story. I'll look at the story. We'll go through the editing process. All right, this looks good. Okay, so now start designing it on a piece of construction paper. Show me what it would kind of look like and kind of give me the gist of what the game would be. And then from there, they get a piece of cardboard and they make another prototype. So this is where the entrepreneurship comes in and the real world factor comes in. So they'll take that cardboard one and come in and be interviewed by myself. So I'm the owner or I run a game company and they're coming to get funded. So when they come in, they have to be prepped. They got to be ready, and they come dressed up, dressed for the part, dressed for the job you want. You always hear that, and they come in ready to go. They get answered, some real questions, and afterwards, I follow up and give them advice on, what, you came in shorts, you had a nice shirt, but if you had come in, I would have probably said, are they going to take it serious or not? I would have had some reservations. I go, it just depends on the person. I go, some people would probably come up with an excuse not to see you if you're not dressed properly. They'll say, sorry, it's last minute. I know you're here, but we have to reschedule, and they won't call you back. It can be brutal. I told them, and to kind of expand on that, 2 years ago, I had a student that she took home part of the project because she wanted to fine tune it and make it look a little neater for the interview, which was the following day. And I told her, look, you can't forget it. Forget it at home. And they don't get it here in time. You're going to move forward. I can't move your interview to the afternoon or later. I go, you got to stick to the time you're given. And she walked in and she's there and I can see her talking to her teammates. And I don't know what they asked her, but her eyes flew open and she looked at me and she looked at them. And basically what happened is she left it in her mom's car. Mom works at the prison as a CO, cannot be contacted once she's there. And it's like 40 minutes away. So she was already at work. Even if she could have told her to come back, their interview was like in 10, 15 minutes. So we go through the whole thing and I tell them, look, I can't see the idea because where's your prototype? And she was very honest. And instead of saying mom, she said, oh, my coworker has it in her car, but she's unavailable. I'm unable to contact her. So I had to tell her, look, your group can't move forward. I'm sorry, I can't fund your game. Maybe we can set up something else later where, I can re-interview you guys. But, right now I have to say no. So she started crying and I was like, wow, I did want something like this to happen. Not to cry, not that I want to make kids cry in my classroom, but I wanted them to have that experience where, man, I let these people down. But it's always what we want in education. We want to have low to no cost for them.
Right.
I want them to experience this and it doesn't cost them anything to retry it. Especially that's why I love 3D printing. They mess up a model, they can just go ahead and print it again. But she just said, you know what, I let my team down. I felt like I was prepared, but you know what, I was so excited in the morning. She goes, I wasn't in control. And she kind of expanded on it more and she was crying. And I told her, but you're going to make the game, right? She goes, yeah, but she goes, I was so into it. She goes, I felt like I was not going to. She goes, and I had let everybody else down. She goes, and if we had other workers for us, like, cutting out the wood or designing the figure, she goes, I would be letting them down. So that's something that no amount of technology, no, amount of money that I could invest in my classroom is going to really do that. I have to do these kinds of projects where it incorporates all that. And, yeah, that was an amazing piece. So right now they're on the part where they get interviewed, they get a piece of wood. I go to Lowe's, get it chopped up, which I got to run to Lowe's today because I got some teams that are ready for tomorrow and they need a different size piece of wood. But they paint it nice. They type up their questions if it has questions or little cards, and they're going to glue them. And I'm going to see if I can even get them laminated. But then one of the things that elevates this project from other years is right now I have access to more 3D printers. So they need tokens. They can find something, modify it. They can design something from scratch. So now when they're going to box it up, that's the other thing they don't know. I'm going to have them design the box for it. That's the new thing this year. Um, they're going to box it up and they're going to, you're going to hear that stuff shaking inside because it has, dice in there. It has a special die they designed and it's 3D printed. Some people have already started painting because they're like, well, I needed this color. They say, but they're like, it's all right. It's printed out in brown filament. I'll just paint it black. Or I needed this color. I need this detail. Don't worry. And they're running with it, and it's awesome because some of the games that I've played, there's two in particular I can think of. Yeah, I would buy a couple of these games for sure.
Amazing. Another authentic project, right, Jesus? And I love the fact that you're, integrating the pitch, the Shark Tank pitch, and you get to play the role of Mr. Wonderful or Mark Cuban or one of those fine people on the panel, and hear them out. And because they are put in that position where, hey, this is a serious obligation and a responsibility to colleagues and teammates, and they are activating all kinds of literacy proficiencies and competencies as well, right? Because they have to prepare their script and they have to deliver it in a convincing and compelling way. And so it's just more authentic products. Yeah.
Yeah, and you mentioned dumpster projects. Every year, I got to figure out who's gonna take it home, and usually I have them do rock paper scissors, or I have a randomizer on my iPad, and I tell them, "Look, I'm gonna randomize it. First name that pops up takes it. You guys okay with that?" And usually they're okay with it because you know what? They know I'm not being like unfair or oh well he's picking that person because he likes that person better. It's like look, it's gonna be completely a draw, and whoever gets it, And I wish there was a way for them to make the same game, 3 times if they could, but resources and time that it just won't allow it. But yeah, it's awesome, and I've never had the kids not take them home. They take them. They even take their cardboard arcade games home. They're over there lugging them, into the parents' cars, and they ask the parents to bring like a little truck if they need it because some are very tall. It's very cool for them to take that stuff home.
Hey, Seuss, tell us how you're looking to grow professionally and improve your practice this year. Can you share with us about a specific professional goal or perhaps a project that you're currently working on?
So something that I had been thinking about for a while and kind of just happened recently is, and it's not 100% for sure happening, but I mean it's almost in the bag. I've always wanted to offer classes on everything that I do in my classroom. It's not just 3D printing; it's robotics, it's design thinking, it's engineering, it's game design, coding, programming, everything like that, even drones. Um, but to those students, those kids that it's not available at their school site, in their district, in their town. So in the evenings, what I want to do is offer classes where the kids come in and they start learning about STEAM. And by doing STEAM, one of the first things that right away they're going to improve on is their communication skills and their language because they have to communicate effectively. These classes, it's going to be you know, just a mixture of everything that I already do in my classroom. So, we'll probably start off with just design thinking and 3D printing, but expand on that. I really like it because the organization that I'm going to work with, it's our local LGBTQ um, resource center. So they're there for kids to come by and get help, get resources if they just need someone to talk to because, they feel like, okay, if they've ever felt that there's not a place for them, that's a place for them. So a family friend of ours, she said, "You know what? I know someone that might be able to help you do that, and they have like spaces there." So I met with the lady there, Rosa, and she's super excited. But she asked me something. She said, "You know what? Are you okay with teaching these classes here?" And I said, "Well, what's the problem?" She goes, "Well, the place it is." And I said, "No, look, if the parents are going to be that close minded, then I'm sorry, maybe the kids are going to be that close minded, and I hate to exclude them." But if they're gonna say, "Oh, I can't go there," then I'm sorry, keep your kids at home. I mean, it's not gonna be a good fit for them. And she even asked, on the flyer, what do you want it to say? I go, look, I have a logo for my blog. That needs to be on there. I go, but so does your logo. I want everyone to see, like, look, this is where it's gonna be at, and it's okay because education, technology, learning, all that is for everyone. It doesn't matter what you identify as. It doesn't matter what race, where did you come from, how well do you speak English, what's the color of your skin. Any of that stuff does not matter. Especially like in my classroom, I always push technology harder on my female students, and I try to still balance it out where I don't overdo it, where it's like I don't want to say pandering, or the boys feel like, oh great, he favors the girls only. But I talk to the whole class and talk about, look, have you ever felt like these toys or these tools or these resources like in technology are not for you? And usually what do I get? Girls. And then I talk about that. So the fact that it's at that place is even better because now I feel like, look, you're gonna come here and learn about technology and it's for anybody. And you're going to learn about engineering, it's for anybody. You're going to learn about um, game design, it's for anybody also. And that's something I've been wanting to do for a while. And it's funny because I gave Rosa this little Grim Reaper, like this little cartoony one, and she showed it off to somebody that was coming in, and it was a coworker, and she goes, "Oh, I've heard of 3D printing. Isn't it hard? And how does it work exactly?" And she goes, "When are you going to offer this for adults?" And she has a gentleman that designs for her like their logos and t-shirts and the flyer, and he already told me, "Hey, when you offer those adult classes, I'm gonna RSVP already. Can you put me on that list already?" But I think that's gonna happen later on. I think I'm gonna start with just one group, 4th through 6th grade, and start expanding it. And then the other part of that would be to expand it not just to adults, but maybe like a focus on education. Like, how can you use it in your classroom? Why do you want to do these projects? What standards are you meeting? Do you want to do this project, but you're not sure how to defend it? Okay, well, let me show you why you're doing it and what are you hitting. So if you want to pitch it to an admin and say, "Hey, like, I want to do this project, but I need these resources," or you're going to come in and see some wildness in my classroom, but this is why it's beneficial. We can definitely do that, but that's further down the road. But I think the the base of it is there now, and I think it's going to be a very strong base.
I love what you're offering there, Jesus, and just the message of equity and inclusion, that every single person is welcome. That's part of, here in my district, we call it ADST, Applied Design Skills and Technology. It's part of 3D printing. It's part of all of these makerspace sort of, we often call them electives. They're not the core subjects, and that's a good thing because they provide on ramps for learning, and for some learners, for some students, that's their sweet spot, right? That is the place that really gives them joy and allows them to come alive in education. And so I love what's happening there, and you're actually getting me thinking about maybe some of the summer classes that I should be offering here in my area.
So you mentioned like electives, and not that it shouldn't be just an elective, but um, you know, when I first started teaching, some of the stuff I did was very traditional, and I'm like, man, this classroom is just like dead. It's soulless. And just basic, I don't say basic projects, but once I started doing more projects, things that really got them creating, even back then when I didn't have as much technology available because I hadn't, got it donated or invested in it and sought it out. Um, but it put, meat on the bones. The kids were like, "Yeah, this is awesome. Okay, can I have more of this? I want to keep learning. Wait, the bell rang? No, I don't want to go home yet. I want to keep working and learning." When you get that, and I don't want to sound like, "Oh, hey, my kids are always forgetting to go home," but I walk in to school and yeah, they're waiting in front of the classroom because they want to go inside already. Oh, can I do this? Can I use that? Or they just go and grab their MacBooks or whatever they're gonna use and start exploring with, and they do that. And I think it should be like that in every classroom because it's. Oh, think of this. Okay, this is how we look at it. Okay, I'm gonna teach English. It's a steak. Well, here's your steak. Would you like it? Sure, it's okay. I just like the natural meat flavor, I guess. But how can I spice it up? Well, let me throw in a little bit of coating. You know, oh, do you want a Worcestershire, type sauce with it? Do you want let me throw some garlic on it, kind of like crust it? Like, how do how can I make it better? It's great. I need to eat the steak, but what can I do to make me want to come back to that restaurant more? And with technology, see, I say technology, but it's not even that. It's just a different way of thinking. When we do like design thinking, um, you know, project based learning, I know sometimes we have all these little buzzwords, but to me, design thinking, project based learning, gamification, those are not buzzwords. Those are strategies and a mindset that really takes a classroom and a great classroom becomes amazing and awesome. One that's, okay, the teacher has the heart, but they're just like, what, the kids are not feeling it. Now they're elevating it even more. And it just starts with one little thing. But I think just having just that one subject and not expanding on it, I think that's where it kind of gets stale.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, well said, and thank you for that gentle correction. I think sometimes I will, and I'm trying to grow into more PBL thinking in my own practice, But I'll admit sometimes it's easy to think of the spaces that we're talking about, 3D printing, for example, as one subject, one compartmentalized area, one elective. And you're absolutely right. It needs to be integrated across all subjects. If I'm teaching about ancient Rome, why can't they use 3D printing to build structures from ancient Rome, for example, right? There are so many ways to integrate 3D printing across all learning areas. Well, speaking of all learning areas, Jesus, talk to us about another area of learning for you outside of education. What is it that ignites your passions when you leave the classroom and really brings you alive as a human being?
So for me, one of the things that I love learning as a kid, and I'm guilty of not keeping up with, but I mean, I, once you have a career, that's why you want that career that you're gonna love, because it's gonna consume a lot of your time, and then those other things become your hobbies or passions. But the thing that I always loved to do was draw. I love anything that has to do with drawing, with art in general, um, whether it's sculpting or I have it looks like a pen. You plug it in and it heats up, and you can kind of like trace an image into wood. My wife found it somewhere and bought it for me, and I've used it a few times. She even found like a video, like how do you trace it onto the wood so you can come out and have a better project. She's awesome, by the way. I love my wife. Uh, the other one is music. She didn't invest in this crazy like $500 violin, but she knew that I love the sound of the violin. I love music in general, but just I love it and I always wanted to learn it. So she bought me one, and I pull it out and practice every once in a while. But that also kind of goes back to how I run my classroom. I have an art classroom in Google Classroom for them, and they have digital tools available, like that Google Quick Draw. I don't know if you've ever seen it, where you have to kind of get it to figure
Yes.
out. Okay, so the kids will use that, but they can go online and draw. Some will say, "Hey, can I trace?" I'm like, "Sure." Whatever's gonna make you a better artist. I offer tips. I'm not the best, but I mean, I offer. But then I also have a music class in Google Classroom. So I mean, I think I already mentioned before. My classroom is fifth grade, but it's multiple subject, but it's really different. And when I was younger, I wish my parents could have afforded to get me an instrument like a violin. I used to play saxophone. I haven't played it like in 15 years. That's a little surprise if nobody knew that.
Hello.
Um, there's a backstory to that's kind of sad that I don't want to share too much on it, but it involves my brother doing something that he basically pawned a saxophone that I had basically been gifted for like $50. Those are expensive. It's okay. We moved past that. But as a kid, I mean, this is when I'm 19, but it made me feel even then, man, I wish somebody had given me this as a kid. I really loved it. I didn't know I was going to love it as much. So we have a lot of like the Google music creation tools available. Um, right now they're using Soundtrap also to they can go and create tracks. Some will record this random things and try to turn it into a song. They've gotten into podcasting. Um, because I had them do a podcast project also. But the music stuff, sometimes they have their headphones. They bring their own headphones. They ask, "Can I have them? Can you help me set up these Bluetooth ones?" And I'm like, "Great, cool." And they're just working on music when they're done with whatever their assignment was, or they finished all their projects. And again, it's something that I brought into the classroom. And when I see them, I'm like, "Man, I need to go home and practice." But then I get home and everything else happens, so then I don't. So I'm bad about it. But yeah, those are definitely the two things that I wish I had more time for.
You are modeling that life that we try to convince our learners to pick up, which is learning is fun. Learning can fuel us, and we can find that passion, find that niche wherever it might be, and that can be a part of the school life. It can be, our personal life as educators should bleed into the classroom. And you were doing that so well through everything that you mentioned, not just the 3D printing, but the art and the music and the obviously my ears perked up when you said podcasting. So I just have to push that a little bit further. Are your students plugged into Anchor, or there are other apps out there? What are they doing as far as podcasting?
So I've done it before, but it was a little. It wasn't as structured as I should have done. But this year, during history for Civil War, they wanted to learn more about the Civil War. So, and it's something that they mentioned. They're like, I like that you don't mind jumping around on the timeline, because they were like, we want about the Civil War now. They were hearing about everything that happened with the Middle East. They're like, oh, we heard World War III is gonna happen, and I'm like, wait, what? I'm like, oh, well, it's gonna take a little more, but I mean, and in my mind, I'm thinking, well, will it? Because I mean, sometimes it's one person, and they asked me about that meme. There's a meme. Oh, some one person dying doesn't mean a war will start, and then it has like a little picture, and it's like, oh, do you know about World War I? Um, and so they were asking about that, and I said, "Well, time to learn about Civil War." And I thought, "Do I have them read about it?" I don't know. You guys are going to research about it. Give me 5 reasons it happened, um, and here are your choices. And I told them for the podcast, you need to show me the 5 talking points you're going to have, and you're just going to talk. I go, it's your first episode ever for this little group that wants to do it as their way of presenting. I go, just talk. And I would go out there and they're like, oh, we stopped. Why? It's because, 3 minutes in, I coughed. I'm like, it's okay. It's a podcast. It's not professional. I mean, it's professional. I go, but it's not like that. I go, you just have to start talking. Don't worry. And I played it for the class and everybody's just quietly listening. And they were pumped. So a couple of the boys from that group, when they have free time, they go and record a podcast outside. Quick 5 minute one when they have a chance, longer if they can. And they talk about sports. They love soccer. So they talk about, what the matches they saw, their favorite players. And they'll ask me to listen to it. They'll ask if the class can listen to it and they'll post it up on Google Classroom. And then the other kids start asking, hey, can we do a podcast? I told them, yeah, we're going to do it as a whole. But I go, you're going to have 2 to 3 members again, and you're going to pick the subject. And then you're going to go through the whole process. I understand the process, Tim, but I'm bad about recording. I used to record with my brother. I recorded a couple times with, I don't know if you know him, Teach the Tech on Twitter, Paul Gordon. But again, I don't make the time for it. I should, but I'm like, I'm really bad about it. So I have a podcast idea in my head. I just haven't followed through on it.
Hey, and there are limits, really. There are human limits to everything that you can accomplish. And we're going to get there in just one moment. I wanted to make one last comment, and simply this, that I appreciate that one detail you dropped about some of the art activities your students are doing. I like the fact that you let your students trace. And there's a thought out there sometimes that you find among teachers that tracing is somehow cheating or it's not actual learning. And I think the opposite is true. I think tracing and imitation is some of the very best ways that our students learn. And I'm also a believer in the idea that everything we create is a remix. And there's an amazing YouTube video up by that title, that everything is a remix, meaning that we have to be really careful with the idea that we have these original creations, when in fact, just about everything we create feeds from all of these other inputs, right? That we have seen, things that we've read or enjoyed in the past. And so I don't think there's anything wrong in the right context with students copying and imitating ideas here and there, because that is how they learn. And that tracing might be their very first step towards creating something of their own, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, isn't tracing just scaffolding?
Right.
Really? I mean, it's the same thing. And then, you mentioned remixing. In 3D print design, if I take a model of like Yoda and turn it into a cup, like I cut away a piece, make this bigger, plug a hole in it, it's called a remix. And it's the same thing with earlier the Leroy's big idea pitch. I'm not the first one. I didn't come up with those designs for those prosthetics, and I'm not the first teacher to print it. My idea was, you know what, let's do it, but let's get that human connection there. Let's build on social emotional learning, empathy, and let them show, like, let them know, the students, look, I'm over here in this small town, but I got a printer. I changed that person's life over here in Florida. I'm gonna do it again when I ship this one to Michigan. You know what? There's somebody in Canada. I'm gonna send it over there. And you know what? It's not costing them that much. And if someone sees them doing that, you know what's going to happen next. They're going to say, hey, well, can I give you $20 so you can keep going? I know you're a kid, you're doing this. And yeah, it's the same thing, that it's the biggest reason that I have them do these things, because when they get older, I want them to say, okay, you know what? Now when I'm 3D printing, it's not taking me an hour to make this figure. It's I put it, I walk away, go make myself a cup of coffee, and it's been sitting there already for 2 minutes done. It's how can I take this, machinery that can do things instantly now or make it faster? What can I do with it that nobody else is doing? And how can I just make my world a better place? How can I change it? And at the same time, help me financially take care of myself where I don't have to rely on, you know what, crime, or you know what, I can't make any money. So now I'm depressed and I'm leaning back towards drugs and alcohol. So really, I think that's the biggest thing about it all, and when you said remix, I was like, yeah, that all these things are not that there's no more original ideas, but I think people need to look past it and go, oh well, I've seen that before. No, yeah, you have, but now we're improving it. I mean, Fortnite was not the first game like that. We had PUBG. Did it improve on it? Sure. Right now, from what I'm seeing, there's a lot of kids that play Apex, and they're kind of pushing back Fortnite, like, yeah. And MySpace was, remember MySpace?
Sure.
Everybody had MySpace, and now where is it? Facebook came along, and that's what we want the kids to do: is say, look, that exists. How can I make it better? And then how can I take care of myself financially? And then if they build that empathy and they're making decent money, hopefully they'll remember, you know what? Somebody helped me along the way. Now let me help these people.
I'm right there on the same page with you. Well, I guess one last thought on that word original. I do use the word original sometimes, or talk about original ideas, but I just think as educators we have to hold loosely onto that idea because again, and we're on the same page here. All ideas stem from other ideas that have gone before. Well, Jesus, you talked about doing things quickly and well. So let's talk about productivity here for a moment. Can you share with us about a personal habit or maybe a routine or some kind of an app, some kind of a tool that contributes to your success? How do you get it all done?
So it's this app called Wunderlist, Derlist, and all it is just you make, oh, I need to do this, type it in, but I don't know if it's just the gamer in me or what, but every time I complete a task and I hear that little ding, it has like this little distinct ding to it. I'm like, yes, and then I'm like, oh, another one, yes, and once I open it, I can look and say, okay, you know what? I need to do this. Oh, wait, this one, I started it. Let me finish that first. Boom, that's done. And I'm like, well, I'm already working on something. Let me knock this off the list too. So that keeps me kind of organized. And sometimes I'm like, okay, I want to do this, I'm going to do this. And I got like 8 things that I'm thinking about doing. But then I'm like, where do I start? And so if I put it on that list, I can kind of organize it too and say, okay, this is at the top because of the first one I want to, ding off of there. That one is definitely the one that I'm always using. Um, because I know myself, I'll be like, wait, did I send that email, or oh, did I do this? And I'll forget. But if it's on there, usually I check it like in the morning and at lunchtime, and then in the evenings. So and it helps me a lot.
Well, hearing about the ding helps me understand why you're using that and not Google Tasks or Google Keep, right? Because those apps are available, or at least for all G Suite schools, they're available, but they don't give the ding. And so you're getting a nice little dopamine hit every time you get work done. And you know what? That would work for me too. So I'm going to check that out. Well, Jesus, it is time for your quick picks. And here we want to know the education voices and resources that are really shaping your practice and inspiring your thinking today. So, starting at Twitter, tell us about someone we should follow there and share why they've been inspiring you lately.
Paul Gordon, Teach the Tech. I mentioned him earlier. He's a teacher I know for 2 years. He does even more than I do. He does esports. They got the jerseys, they compete, but he has the structure there for anyone that's like, you know what, why should I do esports? Okay, look at Paul Gordon, and he's very open about, hey, you're in the area, come see my school. Um, Q is actually hosted where he lives in Palm Springs. Spring Q is in March. I think it's the third week of March. Um, he does 3D printing. He has a laser cutter. He does everything that has to do with like design theory, and kids will be like, oh, I want to try this project, or I have this idea, and he'll be like, yep. He's very like, yeah, let's try it, and he understands that whole mentality of, look, I'm gonna try this. It's probably gonna blow up in my face, But from that, I can figure out, okay, how can I make it more effective and better every year? So he's always somebody that I'm like, okay, we talk almost every day. But we're always talking about shop and, okay, what are you doing now, or how does this work? And we'll definitely get feedback from each other, like, yeah, that looks like it's not going to work, or that's an awesome idea. So he's definitely somebody to follow.
Next, point us to an ed tech tool that you currently love using in your classroom or somewhere else in your professional practice.
I use Explain Everything to teach up on the projector, but I want to talk about the Oculus Quest. So I have two Quests. They're $400, and it's an all-in-one VR set, so you don't need the gaming PC and all that. And right now, it has me the most excited because they just introduced this feature where you don't need the controllers. You put your hands and it'll recognize your hands. So if I just have my pinky sticking up, like I'm going to drink some tea, that's what I see through the goggles. I see these virtual hands. And I had kids trying out this app called Virtuoso, but it's VR Chuoso. And they put the controllers down, it scans their hands, and it's very accurate. Well, they start to play the piano in VR. And the kids were like, wait, what am I doing? And they took their the headset off, and they're like, what is this? It's huge. There's so much to it, and it's the one that right now I keep looking for more because there's this program called SideQuest. So when people are developing for the VR sets, they have to submit it, but sometimes they don't have the funds to submit it, or it's just like a little goofy project they're testing as a theory. But you can install it on your headset safely and test it out. And some people are just like, look, I made this. It's for free. Everybody can have it. I want to sell it. And that's one of them, that Virtuoso one. And there's so much on the Quest and other headsets that are they use the PC. Those have even more, but there's a couple of them on there. Tilt Brush, they draw in virtual reality, but there's one called Sculptor VR. You can sculpt in virtual reality, walk around your sculpture, and then you can pull it, Tim, and 3D print it. Of
Oh,
course, it goes back to 3D printing, but
yeah.
but it's amazing. And then the last one, just real quick. I know you said one, but the Quest has these few that I'm just like, wow. So Rube Goldberg machines. To set them up in your classroom, you need a lot of space, right? On the Quest VR, there's one called Gadgeteer. It's virtual Rube Goldberg machines that you can play with, and then you start designing your own. The physics are phenomenal, and the kids that have tried it so far, they're like, wait, I tried this. Does that really work? So, they'll hit like a ping pong ball a certain way with like a piece of wood. And I'm like, well, let's try it with a piece of cardboard. Does it look the same? So now they're like, wait, how accurate is this? So now they're thinking, wait, if I was to do something, how could I make it more accurate? So now they're thinking even bigger. And right now, that's the one that I have one at home and one in the classroom, but I have it here at home because throw air quotes on it. I'm researching here at home how to get more stuff and implement it more into my classroom.
That's the best part of the job, right? Is the quote research, and it really is research. I mean, but that's part of what it is to be a passionate educator and lifelong learner. I've heard about the Oculus Quest on the On Education podcast from Mike Washburn and Glenn Irvin, and that was a really good description that you just gave. I'll have to talk to my admins about getting that tool. We'll recommend one book, Jesus, one that you've been reading lately, or perhaps one of your all-time faves that's been deeply influential.
So right now I'm reading one from a new colleague friend. We connected through Twitter, and we've been talking a lot about design thinking. That's Dr. Lindsay Portnoy. She has a book called Designed to Learn. It's about design thinking, design theory in the classroom, and why it's so important. And it's a good book. I'm about halfway through, and a lot of it is, yep, reaffirms what I'm doing. And there's a lot of it too that I'm like, okay, I hadn't thought about it like that, or let me pull this aspect into it. Um, she's amazing on Twitter. She hosts a design thinking chat on Wednesdays. Yeah, every Wednesday. I know it's Wednesdays because I'm always late to it, and I always tweet at her when she tags me, "Hey, you're gonna make it." I always tweet something that has to do with time because I'm always trying to make it on time. But that's a really good book. She's someone definitely to follow, and that chat is really good too.
All right, Designed to Learn from Lindsay Portnoy, and we heard that recommendation, the same name from Kelly Bari, my last guest on the program. So, Lindsay Portnoy making some waves in the education conversation. And I know you are a podcast listener, Jesus. Tell us about one that you've got in your deck.
It's not education related, but it's really good. It's called Crime Junkie. I love true crime. My wife is a criminal justice major, so she loves anything that has to do with true crime. Um, she got me onto it, and the episodes are, I mean, Serial. Before we started, Tim, you mentioned you're listening to Serial. That's a lot to take on, because it's a lot of episodes that are connected, but it's really good. That's not a knock on Serial. But what I liked about Crime Junkie is each episode, at the most, maybe every once in a while, it'll be a two-parter, but it's about 20-30 minutes. So my drive to Calexico is about 20 minutes. So I can listen to an episode there on the way back, or two episodes per day. And they will talk about, crimes that have been solved. They'll talk about people that are still missing, and they like to focus a lot. And this is what I really like about them is they really focus on cases that did not get a lot of exposure in the media. And there's been a couple that they covered. I went back and checked, because the episode was 2 years old and it's been solved. And I'm like, I wonder if they sparked that interest in it. And yeah, that's definitely one that I'm always listening to. And my wife gets mad because we want to talk about the same cases, and she'll be like, "Hey, I'm on this episode." I'm like, "Oh, I'm like 3 ahead of you or 4 ahead of you." And she's like, "Hey, why are we on the same page?"
Well, that sounds like some of the occasional disagreements we have at the KV house over Netflix when we're watching a series together. So that is super fun. The Crime Junkie podcast. And the two last questions for you here, Jesus, both have to do with video. First of all, YouTube. Is there a channel that you are really enjoying there these days?
It is a 3D printed one. It's Uncle Jessy. He is always showing off like new printers, new techniques that he does, little projects. Um, so resin printing is awesome, but it's kind of smallish in build size and build volume. And he's one of the first ones that I saw show off this one called the Phenom. And I told my wife that's the next printer I want, even though it's like $2,000. She's like, okay, but where are you gonna put it? I'm like, look, it's a giant resin printer. What does that matter? Um, but he showed that off. But what I really like is he'll follow up those videos and kind of not retract what he said, but he'll say, hey, look, I talked about this, but now I spent more time with it, even though it was given to me, or sent to me to review. I got to mention this is even better now, or you know what, it's not what I thought it was. So let me kind of follow up on that. And he has one. It's like it's about a sonic cleaner. So you get something from the resin printer. You're supposed to put it like in alcohol. You put it in there and it'll clean it off and all that. Well, he has a quick video to follow up, and he talked about some of the safety issues with it and how to be safe with it. And I really like that he does those follow up. He doesn't just go, "Oh, well, you know what, this printer's great." And when I see reviews, I'm like, "Well, you said it was great." Not him, but like other video sites. Um, I'm like, but I looked at reviews that's kind of negative. Why didn't they do a follow up? And or these other people reviewed it over a longer period of time. So I like that he does that, and he just has really cool projects.
Yeah, that's an integrity move for sure, especially when a company sends you their product free of charge, right? To actually follow up that review and say, there maybe is this slight weakness over here or something they need to improve. The very last question, Jesus, is just for fun and is based on the idea that as every educator, all educators have their maximum amount of energy and time and productivity in the day. So when you get to the end of your day and you've got no energy left for 3D printing or further innovation, what are you watching on Netflix right now?
So a show's been around a while, and we kind of just was like, it's always recommended because my wife, true crime again, she loves Criminal Minds. What was that one? The one in Las Vegas, the forensic one. I can't remember. Um, CSI. See, all these letters are getting all mixed up. But we're watching NCIS. Man, that show is so good. How did I not know about it for like the last 15 years? I'm like sad now because I'm like, wait, what? It's been here. And it's really hard for us to just sit and watch one and then not, like, how it starts the next episode like in 2 seconds. It's funny because Netflix has the next button, but it's like filling up in like a second. I'm like, why are you even asking me? Just hit start. If I'm not gonna watch it, I'll pause it myself. Um, I just, you know what? It's maybe because I'm barely watching it, but I don't think it's corny. I really like the cases. It's clever. A couple episodes were kind of like, okay, those are all right episodes, but in general, I just like all the characters. And I just think it's interesting. And again, true crime. Not that it's a true crime show, but it's. I like those kinds of shows. I like those kinds of documentaries, and it's just. I'm barely on the first season. No, second season. We just finished the first season like a week ago. But I looked through it. I'm like, what? We're on season 16, and it's not anywhere near ending. All right. I'm like, okay, got a lot of TV to watch. Which sometimes, like on Saturday and Sundays, we'll sit down and kind of be couch potatoes. But yeah, when it's the evenings, we're having our coffee, just hanging out. My son's doing his thing, playing some video games or doing something else. We'll throw on an episode, and sometimes it's an episode or two, but we try to keep it to one episode a night.
Yeah, we have a similar struggle over here at the KV house too. We're working our way through the office, and it's always one more episode, one more episode. Well, Jesus, this has been a delight. What are the best ways for the listeners to follow you and find out more about the amazing work that you're doing?
So they can find me on Twitter at JesusH1979. Also, I have a blog, mrhuertasclass.weebly.com. And also, you know what? I just want to plug, I have a website with Paul Gordon, easyas123d.org. It has everything that we do with 3D printing. My blog is more focused on everything that I do in my classroom, not just the 3D print stuff. On there, they'll find tutorials on how to start with 3D printing, how to set up a printer. That one printer that they see kind of will guide them with every other printer. But also just the basics on like Tinkercad. It's a free software to design, and they can remix or modify models there. And one of the ones on there that I like is how to make a custom-made bookmark. So they'll take one, modify it, and then take care of it from there. So there's a lot of good stuff there for them. And besides that, I don't have anywhere else where they can follow me. But if they follow me on any of those, I'll be very happy. And if they ever need anything, they can definitely reach out through Twitter. If they're on the fence about getting the 3D printer, I always hear a lot of people say, you know what, we have some at our school, they're still in the box. Look, if they've been there for 2-3 years, they're still good. The thing is, take them out of the box and find someone like myself or anybody else on Twitter, and they'll help you get started. And that's the biggest step, just taking it out of the box and getting started.
Absolutely. Get that stuff off the shelves, out of the boxes, and start to play. Unstructured play, after all, what is still one of the best ways to learn, right? For learners of all ages. Well, I'm going to add on to your contacts there, Jesus, and say I am now subscribed to your YouTube channel. But I know, as you said, the Twitter and the blogs are the main places to go. I want to say thank you so much, Jesus, for sharing your time with the podcast today. This has been fun. I feel inspired, and I know my listeners will as well. Take care, and let's talk again soon.
Awesome. Thank you, Tim. Thanks for having me.
Before we sign off today, I'd like to share some highlights from around the Teachers on Fire Nation this week. Our first stop is on Twitter, where Kelly Bahri at KBAHRI5 tweeted, quote, "Smiling face with 3 hearts. Honestly, hands up, high fives, cheers for at Mr. KV on at Teachers on Fire. He is a true professional," end quote. And yes, she actually typed out smiling face with 3 hearts. So that was not my weird substitution for her emojis. But thank you for that message, Kelly. That was awesome. Much appreciated. And of course, I loved our conversation in episode 132 of the podcast, and I am incredibly grateful for your ongoing support of Teachers on Fire. Next, over on Instagram, at Jake Miller Tech, the great Jake Miller wrote, quote, "Dude, that blurring effect, what did you use for that?" End quote. Well, Jake was commenting on a video clip I posted from a recent band concert where I gave an offstage update with students blurred in the background on the video while I spoke. The answer to his question, I used the focus filter in my Instagram stories, and then I later posted that same video onto my feed. So that's another setting that you want to initiate, or at least I like it in my Instagram account. And that is set all of your stories to automatically save to your camera roll, and that way you can reuse and repurpose some of that content on other platforms and in other ways. Well, to everyone who has read, viewed, liked, retweeted, commented, or replied to my content this week, thank you. You are the fuel to my fire, and I so appreciate your support. Make sure you drop by the Teachers on Fire magazine on Medium for some good reading this week, where we featured pieces by Kelly Christopherson titled "Not All Mistakes Are the Same. Some mistakes help us improve, some define our character, and a few help us see that we need others to succeed." Debbie Tannenbaum wrote "Beginning a Creative Venture. As I began to plan my next sequence of activities for my third graders, this seemed to be the perfect time to have my students flex their creative muscles." I wrote a piece called "Unbox the Learning. Recognize labels for what they are, permission to avoid the pain and possibility of growth." And then Debbie Tannenbaum also wrote another piece called "Adding Creative Workflow. Define, Create, and Reflect." The Teachers on Fire magazine is a Medium publication, and you'll find it on medium.com or on the Medium app. If you're already an education blogger, consider joining our growing writing team. You can continue to publish content on your own blog, and you keep full credit and ownership of your content on Medium. And the Medium platform does compensate you based on the engagement and read time your articles earn. So a little bit of encouragement there. Message me at Teachers on Fire on any social media platform for more details and to get started. Well, I will leave you with this quote from my reading at Teachers on Fire. It comes from a book called Balance Like a Pirate, written by three terrific authors: Jessica Cabine at Jessica Cabine, Jessica Johnson at Principal J, and Sarah Johnson at Sarah S.A. Johnson. And the quote is simply this: "Evidence supports time for reflection to help the learning process. It is even referred to as, quote, the stickiest glue for the brain," end quote. Well, thank you for that reminder, ladies, that we need to be all about reflecting for the learning. If we want to learn as professionals, we need to be taking that time to reflect, whether it's in blog form, journal form, podcast form, vlog form, whatever it happens to be. We need to be taking that time to set aside for intentional thought and reflection on our practice. And of course, the same principle applies to our learners in the classroom. They need that time to reflect on their own learning journeys as well. It's sticky glue. Again, I'm your host, Tim Cavey, and I'm so grateful that you decided to spend some of your day listening to this podcast. I hope that in some way the content you heard today from Jesus HUERTA ignited your thinking and inspired your practice. And I'll meet you next week right here on the Teachers on Fire podcast. Take care and have a great week.